Imagine a UK in 2024 where economic data is at the center of every conversation. A country where inflation has reached the highest point among G7 countries, according to the OECD. This begs the question, what's really going on in the UK and why? The impact of high levels of inflation and high interest rates is making life more difficult for both households and businesses. For a country already suffering from a slowdown in retail sales, a study by the London School of Economics points to Brexit being responsible for a third of UK food price inflation from 2019. But how does Brexit directly influence these high levels of inflation? Let's remember that Europe is immersed in geopolitical tensions that have had a direct impact on the economy. Could it be that the war between Russia and Ukraine has had a serious impact on inflation in the British economy? On the other hand, economists are trying to calm concerns by saying that the recession could be moderate and temporary. But for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, this news comes at a crucial time, just before the 2024 general election. Will the Conservative government be able to weather this economic storm and face competition from Labour, which is gaining ground in the polls? In this video, we'll explore whether inflation is truly responsible for the current recession. If so, what could be the reasons? In addition, we'll examine whether this could negatively impact Rishi Sunak's tenure as Prime Minister in the upcoming election. Let's begin. The UK has entered recession after experiencing a 0.3% decline in the last quarter of 2023. The contraction in gross domestic product in the second half of the year was mainly due to the impact of higher interest rates and the rising cost of living. However, the government and analysts are confident that economic growth will resume in 2024. Data from the Office for National Statistics indicates that higher interest rates and the rising cost of living have dampened consumption, contributing to the recession. Last quarter's GDP was worse than expected, with analysts forecasting a fall of close to 0.1%, while the Bank of England expected stagnation. In contrast, the Eurozone avoided recession by growing by 0.1% in the last quarter, posting a 0.5% GDP increase in 2023. In Spain, the economy grew by 0.6% in the last quarter and by 2.5% over the year, according to the Eurostat data. The figures for the British economy were released a day after the publication of January inflation, which showed a better-than-expected performance. Prices were stable at 4% year-on-year, unchanged, despite a government-funded increase in the household energy price gap. This factor was offset by the first drop in food prices since 2021. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has already anticipated the possibility of a technical recession, although he considered it mild and short-lived. Several reports forecast an increase in GDP in the first quarter of this year. Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt stressed that weaker growth was expected due to the priority of controlling inflation. He noted that the economy has proven to be more resilient than expected, with inflation falling, reaching 11% just over a year ago, and wages outpacing inflation over the last 6 months. If this trend continues, analysts anticipate a reduction in interest rates in early summer, which would be a significant relief for households. Some effects of higher interest rates are beginning to soften, such as the reduction in mortgage rates from 6% in the summer to the current 4 to 5%. With inflation more under control, the Bank of England is expected to ease monetary policy in the coming months, having raised interest rates from 0.1% to 5.25% in just a year and a half. This recession in the second half of 2023 is the first in the UK since the pandemic, although the circumstances are not comparable, as GDP plummeted 20% in a single quarter during that period due to the global slowdown. Roger Barker, Director of Policy at the Institute of Directors, noted that recent data suggests a slight improvement in business confidence in recent weeks, and stressed the importance of this progress being supported by prudent economic policies and decisions. But what was the reason for this inflation? By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment and like the video. It would really help us out. And now, let's move on. Inflation in the UK has risen and remained higher than in other countries because the UK has experienced a severe energy crisis similar to that of the Eurozone, combined with an even more severe labor shortage than in the US, notes Ruth Gregory of Capital Economics. According to Wood, an economist at Bank of America, the labor market is tight, not because demand is strong as in the US. UK GDP has not yet reached pre-Brexit levels, but because labor supply is limited. Supply is constrained by Brexit, which has reduced the influx of foreign workers, and by prolonged sickness-related work absences. We don't foresee these chronic supply problems improving in the near term. In fact, Recent labor market data indicates that sickness-related problems continue to worsen, explains Wood. He's referring to the significant increase in the number of people classified as inactive, i.e., not working or actively seeking employment since the start of the pandemic. As for the other inflationary factor, the energy impact, this is due to the following. The increase in energy prices since the pandemic, exacerbated by the war in Ukraine, has been more pronounced in the UK and the Eurozone than in the US. In addition, some Eurozone governments capped prices earlier, and to a greater extent than the UK. The UK regulator's price mechanism delays the decline in energy prices. Energy price inflation peaked at 41.3% in June 2022 in the US and 44.3% in March 2022 in the Eurozone. In the UK, it peaked at 59% and has remained relatively high since then. Following the start of Russia's special operation, the Global West increased pressure on Moscow, leading to the disruption of supply chains and, as a result, a rise in the prices of goods and services in Europe and the United States. The rising cost of living affected millions of households in the G7 countries, forcing some Western leaders to recognize the failure of the policy of punitive measures against Russia and its immunity to Western sanctions. In the face of these challenges, what might be expected in the next election? Rishi Sunak's promise that he would grow the economy has been left in tatters. The Prime Minister no longer has the credibility to claim that his recovery plan is working and that he's turning things around after 14 years of conservative decline. The weakness of the data known so far, together with inflation still more than 1 point above that of the Eurozone and a constant cycle of strikes in the public sector, leads many analysts to define the country's economic evolution as flat or very weak, during a year in which the Conservative government needs more than a few tenths to change the climate of widespread pessimism. An analysis of the budget statement issued by Jeremy Hunt, head of the Treasury, which cut a tax on employee earnings for the second time in 10 months, shows a bleak economic outlook for the next government. The Institute for Fiscal Studies and the Resolution Foundation noted that the next administration will face one of the most serious economic challenges since World War II. The combination of high interest on debt payments and lack of economic growth presents an obstacle to both the ruling Conservative Party and the opposition Labour Party achieving their goals. General elections must be held no later than January 2025, although they could take place in May of next year. According to polls, the Conservative Party, in power since 2010, could face one of its biggest defeats in history. There's speculation that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak could call the elections for the Northern Autumn, coinciding with the US presidential elections. Following the release of the budget report, Labour leader Keith Starmer again challenged Sunak to call the elections in May. Sunak, for his part, avoided commenting on the date. Torsten Bell, executive director of the Resolution Foundation, said, "The task facing the next government is monumental. It will have to manage significant spending cuts and, at the same time, revive sustained economic growth, which is the only way to end the UK's economic stagnation." The UK economy, like others, has experienced severe shocks in recent years due to the coronavirus pandemic and the cost of living crisis that followed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. These situations have raised the debt level to over 90%, the highest level in the last 60 years. The United Kingdom is facing a number of significant economic challenges that are affecting its growth and stability. The UK economy has entered recession after experiencing 2 consecutive quarters of economic contraction. This is primarily attributed to factors such as the impact of high interest rates, rising living costs, labor shortages, and a persistent energy crisis. This combination has slowed the country's economic growth and posed significant obstacles for the government and businesses. The government has responded to these challenges by prioritizing inflation control, which has led to a weakening of economic growth. The high interest rates set by the Bank of England has been part of the strategy to control inflation, but have also contributed to slower economic growth. However, there are signs that the UK economy may be slowly recovering, with growth forecast for the next few years. The UK is at a pivotal moment in its modern economic history. The country must address its challenges comprehensively, seeking to balance inflation control with policies that stimulate sustained economic growth. In addition, it's critical that the government and financial institutions work together to alleviate the burden of public debt and address structural problems in the labor market. The task facing the next government is monumental and will require innovative measures and a long-term vision to overcome these challenges. Reviving economic growth and stabilizing inflation will be critical to ensuring the UK's future prosperity and competitive position in the global context. Despite the current difficulties, the country has the potential to recover and move towards a more prosperous future if the right decisions are taken. Now, I want to ask you who are watching this video, do you think the economic crisis that the UK is experiencing will last for a long time? Let me know your answer in the comments box. And if you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe and leave your like for more videos like this one. We'll see you next time.